Hello, welcome to the Naftiko Capabilities Podcast. My name is Ken Lane. I'm the Chief Community Officer at Naftiko, but you might also know me as the API Evangelist, where I've been talking about the technology, business, and politics of APIs since 2010. This is my podcast. It's a scrappy little podcast. I do it twice a week, but I gather up conversations I'm having with interesting folks about interesting topics and try to publish them every Tuesday and every Thursday, trying to cover different relevant topics of what I'm seeing each week. This week, I'm neck deep in spec-driven development. So I'm doing the work to reconcile spec-driven with design first and other aspects of context engineering that have emerged, skills engineering, and I'm trying to understand what are the moving parts of all of this. And so I wanted to explore some of the history of this, and I recently sat down with Emmanuel Paraskakis, who is an old friend. Been working with him since Apiary days, which so 2011-12 I started hanging out with Emmanuel. But I asked him to share more information about how he sees things evolving, because I associate a lot of API design first with Apiary, API Blueprint, which was a markdown format. And Emmanuel was real close to a lot of that was happening along with others that we were hanging out with. And I think he's got some interesting insights that lead to spec-driven development and product management and where we're at today.
In the design first approach, it's very much a products outside in approach where you say, hey, if the API is a product just like any other product, you absolutely have to be able to, get the requirements from the markets, put together a design that is only a hypothesis for what you think a good product should look like, and then maybe use that design to go out again to the market and validate that design is going to satisfy the market's problems, and then iterate around a little bit and get more validation. Make sure you're building the right thing. That was very, very important back in the days when it was expensive to build. It's not as expensive to build today, but there's still friction. First of all, if you build the wrong thing, okay, well, you're going to spend a bunch of tokens. Okay, who cares? But you're also going to put things out in the market that won't work. You're kind of like wasting your reputation, your good reputation that you have. So it's important, even though it's cheaper today to build things, it's important to build the right thing. Still important to build the right thing. So API design first and doing design first on any product is important with market validation and so on. So API design first, I think, back in the Apiary days in 2015 was ahead of its time. It was a good idea. It was ahead of its time because the tools that were out there were kind of not only difficult to adopt, but it required a mentality change. It required people to change, and people don't want to change, right? We were all used to, barfing out codes, and that was our API. And when we want to fix it, we'll go back into the code, and by golly, we're going to fix it. Now, over time, as APIs became, more and more product-like and more important, we came around to the fact that, oh, well, maybe we have to have a spec so we can do other things. Maybe we have to know what the thing actually does so we can go back to it and it consistently does the same things over and over again. But the tools didn't improve that much. I think what's happening today is we now have tools that have improved, and they allow us to truly do design first. It's become easier to do design first. You mentioned spec-driven development. That's very important. Spec is not just the PRD, which PRD, product requirements document, is what's coming from the market, from customers and so on. Spec is also technical spec. It's the technical design of the product. It's always a good idea to build with spec in mind, products as well as technical spec. So now I think we are building out the tools that enable us to do that at scale and very fast. Markdown specs are one thing. The context that we put into LLMs and tools that we have is another thing. It's very much that design first approach, kind of writ large, and now becoming actually usable, I think. So all that we were talking about years and years ago, I think now is becoming more of a reality. Doesn't matter if it's API Blueprint or Open API or Swagger or Ramble or whatever it is, it's spec. Now, back in the day, I happen to think that API Blueprint was more usable for humans to go and write. I still think it is. I think it's still easier to write Markdown, and we see a lot of use of Markdown these days, rather than YAML or JSON for humans, maybe for non-technical humans. I don't know if it's that important anymore for humans to write out the specs in a structured language. Yes, it's important to express the specs in a structured language, but humans can now just speak what they want in the English language. And machines can translate that for us and structure it. So the intermediate format is not that important anymore. What's important is for you to know what you want to build, have the taste, have the input from the environment and the markets, and be able to put that into your PRD and into your spec so that you can then build the right thing.
I like where Emmanuel's taken this. It's that bridge that I'm looking for between engineering and product, and that's why I wanted to sit down and talk with him. And I think that PRD, those problem statements, there's something there that we need to explore more. But for this bridge to be effective, we need not just engineering, we need also product and business stakeholders in the conversation. So I asked Emmanuel, how do we ensure that when we move into the spec-driven development phase, how do we make sure that the right people are involved in the negotiation and the conversation around all of these specs that are on the table?
I think the biggest problem has always been, hey, we don't know what the thing is supposed to do. We can't agree on the specs because we can't agree that this is the one spec where everybody is having the discussion and is agreeing on. I think this has been the biggest problem. And it kind of doesn't matter what that spec is as long as everybody can go find it, in the middle of the night without asking others. As long as everybody can point to the one place and say, this is what we're building. Does everybody agree? Yes. If you don't agree, let's have a discussion. Great. Now, how easy is that spec to edit? Yes, in the past, it's been kind of like tough for like the non-technical people to go and edit YAML and JSON. Sure, of course. All of that doesn't matter anymore because it's all easy to edit. Because I can sit here in Claude Code and tell it what I want, and it will translate it to any format that I need. And I don't even need to go, not even need to go look at the markdown if I don't want to. I can, but I don't need to. But I can point to the place where the markdown file lives or the whatever file lives, and I can say that's the source of truth. We've checked it into version control, and we all agree on where the source of truth is and what version this is. I think that's the important thing. And that's how you get all the humans, the human problem that we were talking about, to kind of, work together towards that one common aligned goal. I think that was our problem in the past. I think now we're solving that.
Yeah, I agree. It's easy to say though, but much harder to implement at scale. So I asked Emmanuel, how do we build in more guardrails for developers? So as part of governance and the software development lifecycle, we can provide more guardrails that align their work with these product goals that we've agreed upon, and reducing that drift that occurs from inception to production.
Tell you the way I do it. So the way I do API design these days is the following. I first start out with two or three documents. My first document is the actual requirements document, what I've learned from the market about the thing I want to build. Maybe I want to build just a small feature. Here's what I want to build. Here's my hypothesis for what would work. The second thing is a document about the entire market or domain, if you will. Something maybe coming out of domain-driven design that you talked about. But hey, if I'm in the education market, here's how it works. Maybe, there's an instructor, there's students, all the objects that we would talk about in the past. So that's kind of like the invariables, if you will, of the domain. And then I have a series of standards documents, just like the API standards documents that we used to have in the past, that were, Word documents in the past, that are in Markdown, and say, hey, for my API, these are the things that I care about. You can do naming, you can do formats, you can do all the good things that were in an API standards document, and you can also include security requirements in there, just like David said here in the chat. And you take these and you basically go build user stories with an LLM, and the LLM will spit out API specific user stories that's going to do a light design on, hey, here's the resources that you need, here's the patterns that you need, maybe the parameters, but it's not yet precise spec. It's user stories, right? And you as a engineer or as a product person can look at these stories and say, yeah, looks about right. Here you missed this, you missed that. It always misses something. This is where you as a human with your taste and experience come in to correct it. Then from there, you can also pass in another context document, which would be about, hey, I'm building out the spec. If the spec happens to be Open API, then you give it a context document, a markdown document about good Open API best practices. Could be a skill, it could be anything. How do I build good API? Oh, you gotta have the tags, you gotta have the descriptions, you gotta, do components, like all the things that you want in it. Tell it that, take the stories, it will build out the best OpenAPI document you've ever seen. Run it through a bunch of spectral, vacuum, whatever kind of other tools that you have, and a validator, of course, because LLMs will hallucinate. And now you've got a high quality API spec that's both technically and market correct. It's been validated against the market because it came from requirements. It has all the best practices, so you can generate SDKs, whatever you need to do to generate down the line. And it will also be syntactically correct and correct according to the security standards and all the other standards that you have in it. That's coming all from the context. So that your job now becomes, I got to build that context and make sure I manage the context and maybe have source of truth for the context. Hey, where is our API standards document? Is this the one that we all agree is the right one? Where is our Open API best practices document? Is this the current one that we always want to use? And then you can automate that and package it up, and then you'll move that much faster. And also, because you can move faster, you can validate with customers in the market faster. That means you're building a better, higher quality product that the market wants.
This really helps me continue reconciling API design first with product led, with spec driven, and kind of how all of this kind of merges in, and we continue with the momentum we've had with design first as part of this conversation. But part of that conversation around design first was shifting things left so that developers are coming across these things earlier. They're thinking about security, documentation, experience, other things earlier on in the life cycle. So I wanted to understand what Emmanuel thought when it came to that shifting left. Is that still applicable in a spec-driven realm?
So, I mean, all that shift left means is, look, we're going to make the design decisions, or we're going to make the architectural decisions earlier than we used to. We're not going to wait until we kind of see what comes out of the building process to fix the architecture or the security issues. We're going to build them early on. Now that becomes super, super easy with context engineering. And it was, I would say, always easy if you were disciplined enough to use it with automation. So the shift left mentality existed even 5, even 10 years ago, even before that. where you could say, hey, I have these patterns that I want to use, and I want you at design time to apply these patterns and let me know if my design meets the patterns. If it doesn't, throw it out, throw an error to the user, and tell them, hey, do better. And the design isn't a design unless it also meets the technical requirements. That's what we were saying, that the spec is not necessarily just a design or kind of human artifact. It's also a technical design, and that has to be part of it. It's becoming now very, very easy to do that with context. Call it context engineering, whatever you want to say, but the context is important. So now I can say, hey, alongside with all of my things that I want in my PRD and my design, you will also respect these technical specs, these technical rules, if you will. And I didn't watch Kevin's session last week, but I'm sure he hits on that with the skills and so on, because that's what they're all about.
Kevin definitely hit on a lot of the skill stuff in his podcast. You can check out the lineup; it's already been published. But I'm doing plenty of other conversations with folks about skills. I just got off with one with Speakeasy about the skills that they've developed, and so I'm coming at it from many different directions, trying to understand this spec-driven context engineering moment, how that competes with, complements, augments design first, product led, and as we talked about, shift left. So there'll be definitely more at this intersection when it comes to how skills, Claude.md, how different things that the developers are using in their IDEs or their clients are working in concert in this spec-driven shift left kind of mindset. So anyways, more to come. Appreciate you tuning in. We'll see you at the next one.